Here are some helpful keyboard shortcuts you can use for this project. First, let's look at our toolbox. If you hover your mouse over any of the tools, you'll notice that you not only get a name, but in the parentheses off to the right, you get a letter. You can type this letter anytime and automatically select that particular tool. So for instance, the brush tool has a B. If I hit B, it automatically selects. Most of these tools, it's kind of intuitive what the letter you would type is connected with the tool you'll be using. So B for brush, eraser is E, hand is H. Others are not so clear. For instance, if you need to use the fill bucket tool, that's hidden under G. The reason it's G is because if you click and hold on the paint bucket, you also get the gradient tool. There are some related tools underneath the most common tools that you use. To select those, simply hit Shift and then the letter that you're choosing. So if I've got the paint bucket selected, I can hit Shift G and it will cycle through to the other tools till I can select them as well. Same way for the marquee tool. These are my selection tools at the top left-hand corner. If I hit M, I can choose whatever marquee tool, in this case the rectangular, that I use last. If I need to swap to the circular marquee tool, Shift M will allow me to select that one as well. Let's choose the brush tool and look at some of the other keyboard shortcuts you can use with it. With the brush tool, you always know you can go to the top and set most of the settings, the most common ones being the size, the hardness, and the opacity of the brush that you're working with. A good keyboard shortcut to use to change the size of your brush on the fly are the open and close bracket keys found next to the P on your keyboard. The close bracket key will make the size of your brush larger, usually in increments of 10 to 20 to 50. And the open bracket key will make it smaller. If I hold down Shift and use my bracket keys, this will allow me to adjust the hardness and softness of my brush. Right now I've got a very hard brush, so the line looks like this. But if I hold down Shift and then the open bracket key, you can see it gets a little bit smaller. In this case, it also gets a lot softer. The second set of keyboard commands has to do with the opacity of your brush. If you look at the top, you can see by default your opacity should be set to 100%. This means when I paint I'm getting 100% of black or whatever color I'm working with. But if I use any of the numbers on my keypad, I can jump in increments of 10 to that percentage of opacity. So for instance, if I need it to be 50% opaque, I can type 5. Now I've got 50%, and I'm painting 50% of whatever color I have selected. Same way if I wanted it to be 20, type in 2, now I'm painting 20%. If I need it to be back to 100%, simply type 0, and you're back up to 100% from there. If you do need something other than a 10% jump, you can type in, say, 55, and that'll give you 55% opacity with that one. The next set of keyboard shortcuts have to do with your layers palette. To create a new layer, simply press Shift+Command+N, and this will bring up your new layer dialog box. From here, you can notice you can set it to be a clipping mask layer, and you can also give it a different blending mode. But when we say OK, this creates our new blending mode. If I hold down Option+Command+G, this will take whatever layer I have selected and make a new clipping mask with the previous layer that's below it automatically. Again, to ungroup it or unclipping mask it, we'll hold down Option+Command+G and it will remove the clipping mask from there. The final set of keyboard shortcuts it's important to realize is how to undo the things that you've done. Let's put our layers back into there, and I'm going to open up my history palette. The history palette will keep track of usually between 20 and 40 of the different things you've done to whatever document. So notice every time I paint with my brush, it's adding on to those history lists off to the side. Command-Z will undo the last thing that I've done. But if I press Command-Z again, it'll redo it. So I can only undo and redo with Command-Z the last option or last operation that I performed. In order to move further back in your history palette, you need to hold down Option+Command+Z. This will allow you to step backwards more and more. If we look in our drop-down menu under Edit, you can see that there's Undo, the state change, Command-Z, or Step Forward and Backwards is the Option or Shift-Command-Z. Those are very important to remember when you undo and redo things. If you need Photoshop to remember more states that you've been working on, you can always go to Photoshop, down to Preferences, and open up the Performance palette. From here, under History Cache, you can choose how many history states it'll remember. Right now mine's set to 20, but if I needed more, I can bump it up from there. Just be aware that more history states means it'll need to allocate more memory, which means your computer may run a little bit slower. Once you set it, you can say OK, and now it'll remember more that you've done.